Hello and welcome to DCS A10. In this video I'm going to demonstrate the functionality of the countermeasure system, and it's only going to focus on functionality and not tactics. So you can see we're in a holding pattern, and first of all we're in the off mode for our countermeasure system, and in normal situations you would prime systems in pre-flight checks, but I've switched everything off for the demonstration video. So let's look at our countermeasures panel on the right hand side. This system calls this the SMSP countermeasure signal processor panel, but that's a bit of a mouthful, so I just call it the right hand side countermeasures panel. And we can see it's two sections. There's a row of toggle buttons and a row of depression buttons and some controls and a master mode switch. So the first row of buttons, we're going to activate these and talk about them as we do it. And the first one on the left is the RWR switch, and this powers on the RWR receiver, and we'll look at that in a second also. The next one is the jammer switch, is the JMR switch, and that activates our jamming system. It doesn't necessarily switch it into active mode, it just powers it on. The next one is our missile warning receiver, and once again it switches it on. And the final one is our dispenser button, and this activates the power to our dispensing panel, which is the upper portion of this countermeasures panel. So in order to switch the power on, we use the master mode, and currently the master mode is in the off position, and we're going to toggle it to the standby position. And in the standby position we get readout information, but we don't have the facility to activate either the jammers or the countermeasures. So we're going to use this mode to set up a program, and as you can see we have the information on this panel is in two lines, and you can see the top line has numeric values and the bottom indicates what they are. So you can see it's chaff, there's 240 remaining, flares 120 remaining, and we're currently in program A. We can change the program by cycling through here, or by cycling through our HOTAS using the CMS HOTAS rocker switch. I'll show that in a second. So let's look at how we would change, or let's look at first of all the values of the A program here. We don't see it here, we only see the overall information about our countermeasures, and we want to look at the actual program and how it's set up. We do this by toggling the display button or dispenser button to the forward position, and now we get different information. We can see we have the number of chaff, the number of flares released, and the interval between the release, and also the number of times it cycles. So we can see at the moment we can release 2 chaff, 0 flares at an interval of 1 second, and we're going to cycle that 10 times, and that's going to release quite a lot of chaff and flares all in a single burst. Well, it won't be a single burst, but it'll be over the course of 10 seconds. So we're going to change this program, and we do this by selecting the button below the item we wish to change, and you can see it starts to flash. We change it by toggling the rocker up and down, and that changes the number up or down. We're going to leave chaff the same, and we can move on. We could either save this by clicking on the return button here on the right hand side, or we can move on and we can change the next item in the list. So we're going to do that. We're going to change that to 2. We're going to change the interval down to 0.5 from 1, and we're going to change the number of times it cycles to 2. So once we're happy with that new configuration, we can click the return button. If we want to get back into the master display mode, we toggle the display switch to the off position and then back to the on position. It'll take a couple of seconds to liven up. Now there we see it. So we're now back to our original position. So while we're on this panel, let's look at the mode rotary button, and we can see currently we're in the standby position, and the next position is the manual mode. And the difference between standby and manual mode is we can't manually switch on or off the dispensing of chaff and flares in the standby position, but we can in the manual mode. If we move on one position to the semi-automatic mode, in semi-automatic mode the electronics determines the extent of the threat or the type of the threat and decides which program to use for dispensing the chaff and flares, but the actual switching on and off of chaff and flares is left to the discretion of the pilot. The final mode is the fully active mode, and in the fully active mode the action of the flares and the chaff is handled totally by the computer, the system computer. And you need to be careful with this, because if you're in a high threat situation, it will continuously dispense chaff and flares. Depending on the program selected, this could leave you very short of chaff and flares very quickly. So we're going to go back into the manual mode, and now we're going to have a look at the next panel, which is the countermeasures set control panel, the CMSP, which is just over the ADI, and we can also see the RWR from this view. So let's look at the information that's come from the side countermeasures panel and is reflected here. We can see that the number of chaff packages left is 240. We can also see the first indication on there is the current program that we're using, and we can also see the mode from the master mode switch on the side countermeasures panel and the number of flares. So we're in manual mode. We've got 240 chaff and 120 flares, which is the full complement. On the left hand side we can see information about the jamming, and we've got several options for our jammer. We've got Air, SAM1, SAM2 and AAA. And the difference between SAM1 and SAM2 are SAM2 are for much more up-to-date SAM missile systems, but the documentation accompanying DCS highlights exactly what the differences are. Below we can see our missile warning system, and the only information we get about this is that it's active. Remember, if we select our toggle switch on the right hand side countermeasures panel and we switch it off, we would no longer see active here. On the bottom right hand side of this front countermeasures panel we can see 3 buttons. The third one is not used, but the first and second are important. The second one, let's look at that first. Essentially it zooms in on the threats and puts some separation between them so that we can have a clearer view. You can see we have a group of threats shown up on the RWR. This is the RWR panel. You can see we have a group of threats shown up on the RWR panel, and by clicking on the separate button it attempts to separate them into some kind of physical distance so you can identify what's happening with each one. And finally on this panel we have the PRI button, which is priority button, and this basically only filters out what the computer thinks are the highest threats which are being picked up. And we can, when we click that on, we can see a green light is indicating we're in priority mode, and we can see the number of threats has gone down from whatever it was down to 5. And I've almost forgotten, but we have an audio button here that we can use to dumb down the audio or increase it. There's also a button here, we don't see it at the moment. It's actually an LED. It's a light, and it's for our missile warning, missile launch warning. And this will go red once the system detects that there's a missile being launched. So, going to come out of autopilot mode now, and we're going to head towards a threat. And we can see here, while we're en route into a higher threat area, we can see here the program can be changed by using the CMS button on the stick, and I can see by toggling that to the right or the left, I can decrement or increment the program number. We can also activate the flares and chaff, and we see I'm going to go back to program A, and by pushing it forward once, we can see our flares and chaff have gone down. I can interrupt the program by pressing the CMS button backwards once. And we have a quick look outside. We can see as I activate the program, so I'm going to change to the fully active mode, fully automatic mode, and we're going to go back to the HUD and wait for our threats to show up. We have a threat down there to the left, and there it is ahead. So I'm going to come out of autopilot mode, and I'm going to beam that threat. It's an S15 Tor, which is a self-contained unit, and it's quite a threat. But we can see now that the jamming system has switched on from standby, and it's switching on and off. And also we can see the chaff and the flares are starting to reduce in number. So I'm going to go back from the fully automatic mode back to semi-automatic mode, and give me the choice of switching on or off chaff and flares as necessary. You can see also that the system has automatically selected program B as being the best in this situation. And if we want to see what B is, we can look and we can see B has 4 chaff, no flares, at an interval of half a second, and it cycles 10 times. So in program B we would essentially run out of chaff very quickly. I'm going to move back in towards this threat area. As I do that, I'm going to switch back very briefly to manual mode, and I'm going to demonstrate switching on and off the jammer, and this is done by pushing the button on this CMS toggle switch, and we can see both together, and we can see we've gone from standby into operational, and I'm going to switch it back to standby, and I'm going to push us back into semi-active mode. And once again we're heading towards that threat area. I don't want to lose too much altitude, and I need to maintain some speed. I'm going to have to watch out for our SA-15. Okay, there it is again. I'm going to beam it. We don't really want to get too close to this. I would like to see missile warning. So we're going to go from standby into operational. Now we can see there's a circle around it here, so it's currently locked onto us and we have a missile in the air. You see the red light just went on very briefly, and now I need to be dispensing chaff and flares and putting some distance, if I can, between me and that launch. I'm going to continue to dispense chaff. We're in program. We're low on chaff now, so hopefully we've made enough distance to be able to get out of that threat area. Yeah, indeed we have. Okay, we're still picking it up as tracking us. Okay, I think we'll steer clear of that for the moment. Okay, so you can see pretty much most of the functionality for those systems. As I said, the tactics are a completely different matter, and depending on the threats and the threat environment, there's a whole lot of different ways these systems can be used, but this should give at least a good starting point to understand the functionality and what's going on. So thank you for watching.